Happy fall, everyone. Welcome to our November AuthorConnect Chat. I'm Carlin, the sales director at BookPal, a company with a mission to share the transformative power of books with organizations and their people. Today, I am joined by Tien Tzuo, author of Subscribed, Why the Subscription Model Will Be Your Company's Future and What to Do About It. Tien is the founder and CEO of Zuora, ZUO on the New York Stock Exchange. Beginning in 2007, Tien evangelized the shift to subscription-based business models, coining the phrase subscription economy. In an effort to empower this new economy, Zuo built a patented and award-winning subscription management platform capable of powering any subscription business. Zuo was one of the original forces at Salesforce, joining as employee number 11. Where he built its original billing system, later serving as Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Strategy Officer. As you know, he is the author of the best-selling book, Subscribed, Why the Subscription Model Will Be Your Company's Future and What to Do About It, which has been reviewed by the Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, and USA Today. Zuo has been featured in Forbes and Fortune and interviewed on CNBC, Mad Money, and Sky TV. He was named Entrepreneur of the Year by EY in 2016, CEO of the Year by the Silicon Valley Business Journal in 2018, and CMO of the Year finalist by the CMO Council and Business Week magazine. Zuo holds a BS in Electrical Engineering from Cornell and an MBA from Stanford, and is currently on the board of directors for Network for Good and Sailthrough. Today, Tien will share some insights from his book, Subscribed, and then we'll jump into a Q&A. Please do submit your questions for Tien at any time during the webinar, and we'll be sure to include them at the end. Also at the very end today, we will be giving away 4 signed copies of Subscribed, so please do stick around. In case you do have to jump off early, don't worry, as we will be recording today's session, and we'll make it available to you next week. Okay, Tien, it is such an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us. Please go ahead and take it away.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. And thank you everybody for joining this call. Super excited to have a chance to talk to you about some of the concepts that we wrote in the book, Subscribed. And a good place to start is really, why do we write the book? And if you go back about 20 years or so, when I was at Salesforce.com as an early employee, at the time the internet was still very, very new. It was only 3 or 4 years into using things like a browser to access information on website. Amazon.com was a very new company. It was only selling books. But we had a vision that because of the internet, that it would change our software industry. In the next 10 years, we transformed the software industry into away from something where we would sell a product, a bunch of ones and zeros on a CD for our customers to deal with themselves, into a service. And what we really saw is this concept of transforming from a product-oriented view of a company to a services view of a company, of thinking of what you do as not as shipping units, but providing something that people subscribe to, was not just a concept that was limited to the software industry, but we really had a vision that the entire world would go this way. And if you look at our personal lives today, if you look at whenever you have a need around transportation, around entertainment, around food, around work, your first instinct is to whip out your phone and access an app to use a service. When you think about all the things that are showing up on your credit card statements and all the things that you have not had to buy in the last year, this is what we mean by a subscription economy. The idea that every day that passes, the need to buy things to fulfill our everyday needs continues to decrease, and instead it's being replaced by services. Now, we see this certainly in the business that we run today, but we see this in polls that we do really across the world. And so this year we did a poll of about 13,000 people across 12 countries, and we're seeing some very interesting data. We're seeing data such as 57% of the people are saying they want to own less stuff, right? They don't feel the need to own things as in previous years or previous generations. And 70% of the people say that subscribing to products instead of buying things, actually is a sense of freedom and a sense of, of relieving yourself from the burden that comes with ownership. And as a result, 74% of the people say that in the future, we are all going to subscribe more and more to services and own less physical goods. And so what we are seeing is nothing less than the beginning of the end of this whole concept of ownership, right? Which explains trends like Maria Kondo of people saying, I don't need all the things I have in my closet anymore. It's okay. I could throw them out because I have other things that I can use to fulfill my everyday needs. In fact, more and more, I can use things without having to own things. And we're seeing this in industry after industry after industry. And so in the newspaper industry, as an example, you can see a chart here that says newspaper sales of physical copies of newspapers, right, purchased one issue at a time. It peaked in the 1980s and 1990s, and it's been on a decline ever since. But the interesting thing is we are all consuming more news than ever. So at a time where owning newspapers or purchasing newspapers is on the decline, consumption of news is skyrocketing. You can see the same exact trend with cars. And so the red line here shows unit sales of cars. And it's actually declining. It's declining around the world. It declined in China and India last year, and that trend is continuing in 2019. And there's a general sense that 5-10 years from now, we're all going to buy less cars than we are doing today. But consumption of cars, miles driven, continues to go up as more and more options, ride sharing services, car sharing services, continues to rise. And so ownership going down, but consumption or usership going up. You see this in gaming as well. Game console sales that continue to decline, but hours of games played continues to rise, whether it's Fortnite, Minecraft, Roblox, right? Hours games played is going up, unit sales are going down. In the hospitality space, Airbnb has actually eclipsed Hilton in terms of number of nights stayed, which is a fascinating statistic. And so what we're seeing in industry and after industry is this concept that ownership is on the outs and is being replaced by usership. Now, how is usership different? Well, usership is about focusing on the outcomes. I'm just trying to get from point A to point B. I don't want to worry about where's my car? Is it in the garage? Does it have gas? Do I have my insurance? Do I have my registration? Right? I just want to use a service. I want the outcome without having to worry about the ownership. Usership is about customized services. When you're using the services, whether it's Uber or your favorite software as a service application or your set-top box or your phone, you can customize these services to meet your needs. It's not a one-size-fits-all that you see in the product world where we all have to buy the same product and companies will say you can have any color as long as it's black, right? And this whole idea of innovation, right? When you buy a product, that's it. And over time, the day you buy it, that product almost becomes obsolete. And a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, there's another newer version of the product that you have to then go buy. With these services, it's not like that. The Teslas are constantly updating themselves. The software products are constantly updating themselves. Your set-top box is updating themselves. And so there's a sense that you're always with the newest application and the services are getting better and better and better without you having to do anything. This is a fascinating thing because for those of us that are running businesses, there's a chance actually for every company to rethink what they fundamentally do, right? It's not about selling products, but it's about delivering outcomes or experiences. And so in the retail sector, you're seeing that. You're seeing that retail used to be about location, 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 so you can walk into a retailer, buy a product out of convenience. But now with e-commerce, with global logistics systems, right, the idea of physical locations only serving the purpose of buying a product is no longer there. And so the best retailers, whether it's Amazon or Loblaw in Canada, are saying, you know what, we need to build a relationship with customers. The idea that customers walk into our stores, buy something and walk out, and we don't know who they are, we don't have a relationship with them, doesn't make any sense anymore. And you're seeing the best retailers take cues from Amazon, where no matter where you go, a Whole Foods store, an Amazon bookstore, an Amazon Go store, obviously online, they want you to use your Amazon ID so that they can actually continue to build a long-term relationship with you. And when you log into Amazon, you can see every single interaction you've ever done with them, starting with the first purchase that you probably made on the Amazon.com site. Right? Customers, not products. You're seeing this with media companies that are saying, I used to have to send you or sell you a physical product, a CD or a DVD. Now I've got the opportunity to change the entire relationship. I can give you access to the entire library, the entire music library, the entire sports library, the entire Disney catalog. And for some fee, $4.99 a month, $9.99 a month, $15.99 a month, I can give you access to the entire library. And then I can create a different experience that allows you to discover things, right? Discover new movies, new music. What are other people listening to? But it allows you for me to understand your preferences and make recommendations of songs or shows based on what you like. And so media is not just simply transforming the experience of subscribing to a single CD. It's about transforming the entire experience into something much, much, much richer than the experience that we had when we had to buy individual discs. We're seeing this with transportation. And so we all obviously know the story of Uber. The first time you use Uber, your need to buy a car has diminished. And we're seeing lots of people going from 2-car families to 1-car families, and then 1-car families to 0-car families, because they know that it's much, much more convenient to get around with a service versus owning a car. And so we see this as an entire transportation story. And in countries like France, what we're actually seeing is the French rail system competing with car sharing services or ride sharing services like BlaBlaCar, and seeing, does it make more sense for me to utilize the service that's already out there, or do I tap into a ride sharing service to get me from city A to city B? And so the whole experience of getting from point A to point B, whether it's commuting at work or going to a destination, continues to be transformed, and the need to buy physical assets continues to decrease. Newspapers certainly are in the same way, right? And they're realizing that in an online world, this wasn't about selling you a newspaper issue. It wasn't about selling you an article and trying to figure out how to get you to pay 10 cents an article or 15 cents an article. It's not about the product. It's about the customer. It's about the outcome that you're looking for the customer, which is to help them understand what's going on in the world. And every newspaper that has launched a subscription service has seen that they actually have an incredibly loyal customer base, that the brand of news is really, really important to the reader, and that the consumer is more than willing to pay for that experience. And they've been wildly successful in their subscription offerings over the last 2, 3, 4 years. The technology industry certainly has been one of the leaders of this shift. Today, you don't buy Microsoft Office, you don't buy Photoshop, you don't buy Salesforce.com. You subscribe to these services, and you're always on the latest version. Now, the technology industry certainly wrestled with this. How do we move from a model where we're selling a $1,500 product and taking it up front to a model where we're selling something for $30 a month? But what they ultimately understood was this is a much, much better model. That there might be a short-term period where revenues do go down, where expenses go up, but then they cross over. And when revenues then go up, it's a much, much more stable revenue base. And Wall Street and other firms that value companies actually value companies with subscription revenues at a much, much higher value than companies that have to go and chase every unit of sale every month, every quarter, and every year. The industry that we truly are the most excited about is the manufacturing industry. And what we're seeing is every physical product, whether it's a car, whether it's a washing machine, whether it's a water heater, whether it's a watch, is coming off the assembly line connected to the internet. And so every physical product is now attached to a service. In day one, the product will come first, and the service will be an add-on option to the product that enhances the use of the product. But over time, it's going to go in the exact same direction as we saw with the media industry, as we saw with the software industry, where the service will become more and more important. And so you're seeing that with the iPhone, where the number of iPhones sold is becoming less and less important. You can be on an old version, you can be on the new version. What's really, really important are the services that you access from your iPhone. And Apple cares about monetizing or selling those services more these days than actually selling the phone itself. Now, this is a transformation for how companies operate. And so companies are saying, look, if I used to sell tractors, I now need to think in a completely different way. I need to think about how to allow people to access my physical equipment in the areas that they need to do. I need to track the amount of dirt that's moved, and I need to charge them for the outcome of that, right? How do I charge you not for the tractor itself, but what you're really looking for, which is how many metric tons of earth did I move? The media companies certainly think this way. There are still artists, there are still movies, there are still songwriters, but now you digitize all these things, you make it available in the internet, you make it available on any device, right? Phones, tablets, computers, Sonos machines, and then you translate that into some sort of monthly fee that might be based on consumptions or might not be, right? And you're seeing this with auto companies as well. Auto companies are starting to say, my customers, they still want the Ford experience. They still want the Toyota experience. They want the Volvo experience. They want the Porsche experience. They care about safety. They care about luxury, but they don't want to have to buy the car. They want to be able to consume that experience in bits and bytes. I want to use it for a day. I want to use it for a week. I want to use it for 2 hours. Now, I still want the Porsche experience, but how do you chop it up and let me, drive that experience or engage in that experience in a much, much more flexible way? And so industry after industry after industry, this is what we're seeing happening. In the book, really, the first half of the book was to give stories from that we see in the marketplace, from leading edge companies doing really, really interesting things, going beyond the product, whether it's Fender, whether it's Caterpillar, whether it's General Motors, and creating a new experience that's anchored and starts from the customer. Now, this is a completely different way of thinking. And the diagram that our readers seem to go back to in the book over and over again is this one, where people are saying the way we do business today, is very much anchored on selling products, of creating a hit product, of selling as many units as you can. You do that by putting your product into as many channels as you can. You know that there is a customer on the other side, but oftentimes that customer is anonymous. Caterpillar doesn't actually know who their customers are. The car companies don't know who their customers are. It's the dealers, the resellers, the retailers that know this. And that is the old model, and that dominates how businesses run today. But the best companies, the fastest growing companies, whether it's Google, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Netflix, they don't think like this. They start with the customer. Amazon starts with the customer and says, here is an Amazon ID. And how do we then use that relationship to deliver more and more value and more outcomes that they're looking for? And you can see that's how they've been thinking the last 20 to 25 years, and it allows them to expand into all sorts of areas. Adobe used to think like a company on the left, selling you a box of software at a time. And now they think on the right, I've got X million subscribers, and there's all sorts of things that I can do with them. Apple used to think like the company on the left, how many phones do I sell? How many iPads do I sell? And now they say we have 1.5 billion Apple IDs. And how else can we deliver more value in that Apple ID? We're more worried about you as a consumer choosing to use your Amazon ID or your Google ID versus your Apple ID for that next need that you have in your business. Now, companies are starting to embrace this concept. There's a story in the book that anchors the second half of the book, or kicks off the second half of the book, that says this is all great. It's a story of a gaming company that says today we sell a lot of games for $60, $70, $80, and this is a story from a few years ago. And we know that we can sell a lot of games. We also know that 2 years later, when we come up with the next version of the game, only 50%, half of our customers that bought the old version are going to buy the new version. So we're losing half our customers. Where if we, instead of taking that $60 up front, we deliver an experience and we take that $60 over that 2 years of time, that we can carry much, much more than 50% of our customers through with us on this journey and hold on to our customers. This is the story of the gaming company. This is the story of Fender. This is the story of the car companies. But to do that requires a wholesale change of how we operate. And there's that moment in time where companies are realizing this is great, but it does require change. The second half of the book is to talk through those changes. How do you change how you do innovation? How do you change how you do marketing? How you change how you do sales? How you change how you do finance? And how you change how you do IT? So one of the stories we say in the book of innovation comes from Gmail, of saying when you can launch a service and you can see how your customers use your software, drive your car, use your washing machine, it changes how you design product. You want to be able to partner with your customers to drive innovation, which means constant iteration. And so when Gmail first came out, they called their product beta. This is from 6-7 years ago. And then a funny thing happened. 2 or 3 years later, it was still in beta. The idea of operating in beta stuck. It wasn't just a test phase before we actually launched the real product. This is simply how software is simply delivered. This is simply how innovation is delivered. And we're seeing this happening with cars that are updating themselves. We're seeing this happen with factories. People are now building agile factories where every box coming off the assembly line to the destination can be customized in real time based on real-time data to that destination. You're seeing Amazon do this with their logistical infrastructure, right? But this idea of innovating and constantly iterating on your innovation is starting to take hold in all sorts of industries. In marketing, if your product is now a service, what happens to the other 3 Ps? What happens to price? What happens to promotion? And what happens to place? And we cover every one of these things in the book. Pricing completely changes. It's no longer a cost plus infrastructure where I know I can build this product for $50. And if I sell it for $100, I've got enough margin to give to the channel. It's not like this anymore. Consumers are saying, I want an outcome, and I value the outcome in very, very different ways. And if you're Uber, it's not about selling the car. It's about saying, well, what level of Uber do you want? What is the distance? What is the time of day? There's a surge pricing. Are you a loyal customer? And so pricing winds up being dynamically crafted for the customer based on how they value the use of the service. Very, very similar changes are happening with promotion, where it's less about the ad, it's less about the commercial, it's more about executing a brand promise in the context of the experience of the service itself. And how do you work with your channels? The channels still play a very, very important part of this, but how do you arm your channels with the right information so that they can be building long-term customer relationships? Sales is different. Sales used to be about, if I want to drive up revenue, I can either sell more units or increase prices. Now I've got all sorts of strategies that I can execute to grow sales. I can grow my revenues per subscriber. I can sell add-on products. I can pursue new markets. I can pursue new customer segments. I can go up market. I can go down market. And in the book, we outline 8 different strategies that any company can use in the subscription economy to drive revenue growth. Finance becomes completely different. In finance, the CFO's department now takes a leadership role. We shared a story with Netflix where people say, how can Netflix, this is from 2-3 years ago, how can Netflix spend so much money on content? And now what we've seen is everybody else is following suit. Amazon is following suit. Disney is following suit. And what we see is when you have a loyal customer base, and Netflix has about 150 million subscribers around the world. If you assume that they give $100 a year to Netflix, $10 a month, that's $15 billion of recurring revenue that is rather predictable. And so they're able to reinvest predictable revenue back into shows to optimize their business. And so when you have a subscription offering and a loyal customer base, the predictability of your revenue becomes a big, big competitive advantage that you can use. And that's how Netflix really fueled their growth to 150 million subscribers. And so in the book, we actually architect or design a very different looking income statement, right? That actually starts with recurring revenue and then rearranges the standard cost buckets, cost of goods sold or gross margins, G&A overhead, R&D, sales and marketing, to have a roadmap or a formula for how companies can use the subscription-based business model to drive competitive advantage and to drive a much, much more stable business. IT, the final area, has to change. For years and years and years, the IT department in our companies have been focused on scale and standards to drive scale. And that is one of the lessons of the product economy. How do you standardize to drive sales, to drive more units, and then drive that down that unit cost? That is not what the new business model is about. The new business model is about iteration. The new business model is about constant innovation. The new business model is about tweaking your pricing and packaging almost on a constant basis, depending on the service and the customer. And so the concept of agility winds up coming to the fore. And many companies are realizing the existing IT architectures, because they were standards-based, are actually preventing them from being agile that they need, being as agile as they need in the new subscription economy. And so this is why we see statistics such as 72% of Fortune 500 companies will say the greatest challenge, they know how to grow, they know what they need to do, they know how to innovate, but the single greatest challenge limiting their growth is actually their IT systems. The last thing I would say is, while there's change that has to happen in every single department, innovation, marketing, sales, finance, IT, what's the most important thing is actually breaking down the walls in between these departments. In our quest for scale, in our quest to drive more unit sales, we have become siloed in how we run these organizations. And we can feel this as customers when we engage with companies. We can feel that the companies that we deal with that have not yet transformed have a very siloed approach. And so the classic example of that we see is the loyalty program. When we see a company launch a loyalty program, it often tells us that it's a siloed organization, that the marketing department has no ability to change how the product is designed. They have no ability to change how the product is priced. They have no ability to change how sales occurs. And so what they're left with is, all I can do is stay in my domain of marketing to drive future sales, and they land on a loyalty program. And instead, by breaking down the silos and reinventing innovation, sales, marketing at the same time, that's really how you drive success in this new subscription economy. And this is what we hear from the companies, and this is what we hear from the CEOs and the executive suite. And so that, in a snapshot, is a summary of the book. We really believe that this trend of changing to subscriptions is the biggest trend of our time. It requires companies to reinvent themselves on a wholesale basis. The best companies in every industry are doing that today and finding great success. And we wrote the book and shared the stories of these best companies to really inspire people to the growth that the future can bring, and to give a template or a blueprint on how to do that transformation within those companies. And so with that, I'll conclude my summary of the book and open it up for questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Tien. That was fascinating. And reading your book truly has opened my eyes. I mean, all of the examples you give in the book and in this presentation are just so poignant. It actually makes me think back to the early days of, Amazon and Kindle. I came from the publishing world, and so in 2011, everyone was really scared about the decline of publishing in the printed word. And Amazon, like you've pointed out in your book, really did figure out how to best have and develop that one-to-one relationship. And I wonder, thinking back on it, I wonder if publishers had figured out a way to do that first, where they'd be now, as currently they're very reliant on Amazon. What would be your best advice for, publishers or any industry that is really reticent to change into more of that subscription-based model and still has that old framework?
I think the mistake that we see so many companies do is they're focused on the financial model. And the financial model typically does evolve into some sort of consumption-based or some sort of monthly-based. But that's almost a downstream step. The first step is simply to make a connection with your customers. And that was the magic of Amazon, right? People think that the magic of Amazon was their e-commerce, and they solved a different distribution for the products than the physical retailers. And you're seeing now that that's not the case. Amazon actually has a lot of physical locations. Companies like Walmart have a lot of, they do a lot of business on e-commerce sites. But there's still a big, big difference between the two companies. Amazon takes everything back to your Amazon ID, right? They're looking to build a relationship with you. And then to use that data from the relationship to strengthen the relationship and to provide more value to you. Walmart, about 100 million people in the US walk into Walmart every 2 weeks to buy something. They purchase the product, they swipe their credit card, they pay cash, and they walk out, right? There's no history that Walmart can rely on. It's an anonymous, disconnected relationship. And so the first step is to say, how do you know what your customers are? And in today's world, there's really no reason not to know who your customers are. And you don't even have to have a connected product or an online experience. And so one of the favorite stories from the book that seems to resonate with folks is the story of Fender. And Fender is obviously one of the leading manufacturers, if not leading manufacturer of guitars. And they can continue to see their business model as selling more guitars. How do we sell more guitars? Through e-commerce sites, through Guitar Center. And they said, no, let's look at it from the customer's point of view. And they looked at the data. And the data show that 50% of guitars are actually sold to first-time buyers. So there's a lot of new customers coming into the industry, coming into the market, which is really, really good. But 90% of the customers quit playing the guitar after 3 months. It's just too hard. Right? And so they're losing 90% of their customers after 3 months. Now, the data also show that if the customer's still playing the guitar at month 12, that they play for life. If they play for life, they're going to buy more guitars, they're going to buy amps, they're going to buy picks, right? And so when you look at it that way, the answer is pretty clear. If we can get more customers through the hump, then our revenues are naturally going to grow, right? They're naturally going to buy more guitars. And so they launched Fender Play in an effort to teach customers. And so when you buy a guitar now, they encourage you to sign up for a free trial of Fender Play. Immediately they have a digital relationship with you, right? There's these incredible videos I've been trying it myself that teaches you how to play a guitar. And now they can start tracking how many people actually sign up for Fender Play, how many people took lesson 1, how many people took lesson 2. Can we get them over the hump of that 3 month where they're still logging to Fender Play, teaching themselves how to play the guitar, they're still playing the guitar, and the initial signs are very, very positive. And so the lesson really is, do you know who your customers are? Do you have a digital relationship with them? And then can you take them on a journey with you? And then the business model of how you charge for it and how you monetize that relationship, that will follow in time. That will follow in time.
That's such a great story. I loved the Fender example in the book. And yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like you said, with the financial model, the best way to determine that is just later when you kind of start figuring out what your ARR is going to be, right? Your annual recurring revenue.
Sorry.
Okay. When companies do begin to consider that transition, I mean, it sounds like there's not an easy way out if they haven't been doing it, and they need to understand who their customer is and build that digital relationship. Would you say in general, I mean, companies would need to count on maybe like a 3 to 5 year transition and kind of that decrease in sales overall, but the increase in loyalty, or loyalty and relationship building? Is that generally the time frame that it takes for that transition?
I would say that if you're selling products today and you're looking to completely change to a subscription-based business model, that's probably a 3 to 5 year transition. But or more. If you look at the car companies, they're still going to be selling a lot of cars 3 to 5 years from now, but hopefully their connected car revenues will start to grow as well. The other thing I would say is, for a lot of services companies or digital companies, it is a switch, right? Because you're selling the physical product, or now you subscribe to the product. For a lot of the physical product companies, the manufacturing companies, they do have a chance to build 2 revenue streams. So Fender continues to sell the guitar as is, but now they've got a Fender digital revenue stream of people paying $10 or $20 a month for Fender Play. And that's pretty exciting, because in the short term, you're not changing necessarily the revenue mix of your product, but you're enhancing it with more subscription revenue. And over time, you can actually see which one actually grows faster. And what we find is the subscription revenues grow faster to a point where at some point in the future, they'll get to a size where they start to dwarf the product revenues.
Makes total sense. Okay, good to know that time frame. And actually, you just touched on this a little bit in the presentation and in your book. IoT was actually a newer concept to me. I guess, can you dive in a little bit as to what it means and how it will affect businesses going forward in 2020 and beyond?
Yeah, IoT is it stands for the Internet of Things, right? It's a fancy term that I think evokes the imagination that things or physical products are now being connected to the internet. And so if the first wave of the internet was people connected to the internet, right? We grab our phones, we grab our laptops, we access services in. Now the physical products are all being shipped or coming off the assembly line with an internet connection and with sensors. And we're seeing this again with washing machines. We're seeing this with tractors. Caterpillar has publicly said, I think they have 2 million physical assets in the field, and 75% of them are already connected to the internet, already collecting all the data. So you're visualizing that the manufacturer, the engineer that designed these products, and all of a sudden can see how these products are being used, and these products are becoming smart products, right? The washing machine now has the capability of ordering more supplies. The scanner has the ability to download apps just like your phone, and these are thinking large $1 million medical scanners that are downloading cardiology applications, radiology applications, updating with the latest capabilities. And it's pretty exciting. We're even hearing about companies that sell ball bearings, little metal balls, and these are smart ball bearings that are able to detect load and vibration patterns, and it just changes how large machinery is serviced. And so that trend is happening right now. And I'm hard pressed to believe that any product that comes off the assembly line in the next 12 months won't have an internet connection, because it's just too easy to do. And so the transformation that we've seen with a lot of these services are going to come to the physical world. And so as companies, manufacturing companies are realizing that, one, I can now know I have a direct relationship with my customers, right? They need to opt into it. I need to expect privacy, right? But I can actually see how my thermostats are being used. I can see how my washing machine is being used. And I can provide a different experience for the customer that's much, much more higher value. And so they're seeing huge sources of revenue potential and innovation. The other danger, of course, is that somebody else winds up figuring out how to use this technology, and customers wind up using another service, and I just become a product provider to a service provider. And that's the big tension that we see in the manufacturing sector today.
Yeah, fascinating. I wonder if it's just going to continue, moving into other industries and other products. I'm sure over time it will. I had a question just about you, and you mentioned it and touched on it in your presentation, that constant improvement being in beta. Is this a space that you feel, I guess, as companies make that transition, is it hard for companies to kind of adopt that beta mindset? I mean, like you had a great example in the book with the Kanye West example, that he released his album and was consistently making tweaks to it, which I actually didn't even realize until reading your book. But is this something that you recommend that companies try to adopt, that mindset to be in beta to deliver the best value to their customers?
It is, and it is a big shift. And the Kanye example is a great example. When you ship an album on an LP or vinyl or a CD, right? It's frozen in time. And when you stream it, there's really nothing to stop you from going and change it. And so after Kanye released The Life of Pablo, we definitely noticed that he was constantly tweaking it. For about 3 to 6 months, he wouldn't stop. And so you go back and listen to the album, and the tracks would be different, the lyrics would be different. And he would do this just based on the feedback from his fans. And so there's this iterative process that has to happen. And it's challenging for many companies because they tend to think about long-term life cycles, right? I've got a 3-year product life cycle, and then I launch it. and I see if it works. And it's sort of a bet of whether it works or not. And so we have an example in the book about Graze, which delivers you snacks. And you get a box of 4 snacks like every week, every 2 weeks, whatever your frequency is, and then you tell them which snacks you like, and they iterate, and they change based on that. And because they have this ability to iterate, when it's a UK company, when they first launched in the US, most consumer goods company would do a multi-million-dollar study of what the US market is like, launch it, and then it'd be kind of 50-50 whether it worked or not. And they chose not to do that. They took their whole UK inventory, they added some ideas, dumped it into the US, and then people would start to signal. The customers would start to signal, I like this, I don't like this. And so curry and chutney started coming down, barbecue started going up, and within 3 to 6 months, without having done any market research, they completely nailed the US market. And so there's something about iterating and being able to use the feedback from your customers, either direct feedback or just behavioral feedback, to iterate and to provide a much, much better service.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that example in the book. I just was thinking as you were talking about it, do you think that that's an opportunity for like larger grocery store retail chains to kind of start surveying their regular customers and start optimizing all the products that they have on their shelves? Have you seen that happen at all at like grocery chains, for example?
Well, I think the grocery chains are really good at using data and AI to start doing those type of things, right? And what we really recommend for the retailers, we say flip the script, right? Because what happens is in the physical stores, there's something about blending the physical stores and the online experience. And understanding, if you look at it from the customer standpoint, they don't really care, right? They want a brand that they go to that they can trust, and sometimes they want to go to the store, and sometimes they want to deliver to them. They just have needs, right? And the segmentation that traditional retailers have in terms of retail over here, e-commerce over here, is really a broken model. And the interesting thing is the e-commerce side is when you actually establish the customer relationship. And so the example that we like is a company called Bonobos that sells men's clothing. And you can't actually, they have physical stores, but you can actually take the clothes home. It's more of a place to try the clothes. And then if you like it, they simply go back to the e-commerce site and they ship it to you. So there's a blended experience, and they probably hold some inventory now for the most popular items, but you can see it's more of a blended experience, but establishing that customer relationship and understanding what they want, and then getting to the point where they don't even have to come to the store. You know what they want, you know when they need it, and you can ship it to them, right? You can see in advance of them even asking for it. You can see Amazon more and more is going in that direction.
Absolutely. I love that Amazon knows what I like. It's so good. I had a question because you had 2 really great examples in the book about how the New York Times and Adobe both made transitions to the subscription service focused model. I'm just curious, do you think, one did it better over the other, or one, there were different takeaways that different businesses can learn from them?
Well, I think we have sort of, we share these stories more as inspiration points. And so the New York Times has been wildly successful with their subscriptions. I remember when they first launched it, they thought 1 million subscribers was such a big hill. They got to that hill, and they're like, well, the second million is going to be even harder. We're going to have to go international. We're going to have to do all these things. They actually had a public memo that they wrote, and they celebrated hitting the 1 million milestones. And they blew through that. They got to 3 million digital subscribers in a much, much faster time than they thought. Same thing with Adobe. It was a very scary bet. Their stock actually plummeted the first quarter they announced earnings because revenues were down and earnings were down. But after spending some time with Wall Street and helping them understand it, the stock came back up, and it's been on this incredible tear. Because if you think about it, a dollar that is going to recur 3 times, 5 times, 10 times is worth a lot more than the dollar that's just a one-time dollar. I mean, that's just intuitive. But translating that into something that Wall Street can understand was something they did really, really well. So we share those stories to inspire companies that says, look, this is a good path, and this is where the world is going. This is where growth is going to be. It's safe to take this journey. We also counsel them that it takes time. It could take time to iterate a few times to get it right. And so just get out there with a simple, basic offering, learn from your customers, set up an agile system, iterate, and we're just seeing companies that are achieving incredible success, transforming and changing into this model.
I bet. I just have a couple questions left. I was curious with Zora, and obviously you're helping different businesses. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the types of companies you're working with? I know that you mentioned Caterpillar in the book. Are there other businesses that, as they contemplate that subscription model switch, could reach out to you?
Absolutely. So maybe a quick snapshot of what we do that gives us a chance to have this ringside seat, if you will, on the transformations that are going on. We do provide a software infrastructure. Traditional companies use, call it ERP systems, right, from companies like SAP and Oracle and NetSuite to run their businesses. And those ERP systems made a lot of sense when your business was selling products. It was taking orders for products, shipping products one unit at a time, and it was about scale. And what we see for this new business model, it's about pricing, packaging innovation, constantly tweaking your product, constantly tweaking your pricing, giving your customers lots and lots of choice in how they want to pay, how they want to engage, how they want to subscribe. I want to suspend my service right now. I want to add to it. I want to subtract from it. So we provide an agile system that's an alternative to traditional ERP for things like pricing, packaging, orders, billing, revenue recognition, collections, payments. And that's what companies use us for, to really drive their growth, automate these processes so they don't have to, they can be much more efficient, and then give them the type of metrics around churn and things like that they really need. We're able to work with, we are a subscription ourselves, right? We are a software as a service company, and so we're able to work with small companies that are just getting started with this model to the world's largest companies like Caterpillar, like General Motors, that are transforming themselves over time into this model as well. And so it could be in any industry. And so we work with technology companies, we work with media companies, we work with manufacturing, automotive, financial services, utilities, membership organizations. We really do believe that if you think about it, this shift, it's about rethinking your customers as subscribers. And every company and every industry, of course, have customers, and they all have a chance to rethink of them as subscribers. And that's what truly excites us about what's going on in our world today.
Absolutely. I think that's so true, and I can't think of any examples after reading your book where it's not something every business or every organization should consider shifting to if they haven't already. So our last question, and this is just mainly about your book for people like me who, haven't really thought about it long-term prior. What's been the biggest lesson that people, general readers and feedback you've gotten that they've taken away from your book, and how has it helped them transform their businesses?
Yeah, I think the lesson is to take it back to the customer. And it sounds easy, but there's so many sort of hidden assumptions and just the way we run businesses today, from the financial model to how we innovate, that ultimately anchored about on the product. I mean, we were even talking to professional services firms, right? Companies like Deloitte, consulting organizations, law firms, where you would think that they're selling services, but fundamentally they still see the unit as an hour of time, right? And their whole business model is built on an hour of time, versus saying, here's a service that we do for you, here's the outcome that you're looking for, here's a way to express that outcome in a way that makes much more sense to you. And there's stories in the book of professional services companies that are actually changing their approach to customers in a way that matches more how customers perceive value in the services that they provide. And so there's just so many examples of that, and that's why we wrote the book, to inspire people. And in that picture where I showed, the picture on the right of being a product way of thinking about business models, and the picture on the left is starting with the customer. That actually is probably, the diagram that people take it back to truly understand the starting point of the changes that are required to rethink the businesses.
Absolutely. I definitely will be referring to that going forward, and I cannot thank you enough for your time today. Really learned a lot. Just a note for everybody, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar next week, so do stay tuned. You can also visit our website, book-pal.com/subscribe to purchase Tien's book for your organization, or feel free to reach out to me. My email is listed there, carlin@book-pal.com. We will be hosting Julie Winkle Guglioni next week, November 13th, for her AuthorConnect Chat. Definitely check out the link on the screen. And we do have 4 winners who have won a signed copy of Subscribed, and we will reach out. Christian B, Julie J, Renee G, and Scott G. So congrats to all of you, and we will be in touch. And again, thank you so much, Tien, for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.